Hello, greetings. I'm Stephen Hawley Martin, editor and publisher of the Oakley Press. Today we're going to speak with the author of two books we published, Suzanne Munson, an accomplished historian who lectures at the college level. Her latest book is The Metaphysical Thomas Jefferson. To write it, Suzanne spoke with Thomas Jefferson through the renowned psychic medium, Jana Anna. In this video, we're going to focus on what came out of those interviews concerning the relationship between Jefferson and his slave mistress, Sally Hemings. The spirit of Sally Hemings surprised Suzanne and Jana by participating in the interviews when her name came up. Now I'll switch over to the internet video. Well, welcome to the show, Suzanne. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Steve.
Yeah. Well, this is a fascinating book. Really, I think an important book, and one that a lot of people are going to be skeptical about the way it was created. But maybe we could start by telling how did this come about? How did you decide to do this book? What's behind it all?
In a strange way, it's a follow-up to a traditional history book that I released a couple of years ago called Jefferson's Godfather. And both of the books are about America's great need for ethical leadership. And the first book was about Jefferson's collaboration with his mentor, George Wythe, in setting up America's first law school, which George Wythe turned into the first training school for statesmen, for ethical statesmen to lead this country. And so while I was writing that traditional history book and doing footnotes and bibliographies and all those good things, I was on a parallel spiritual journey myself. My husband, Ned, had died, and I wanted to know where he went. And I would go outdoors and I would say, "Where are you?" I wasn't hearing anything. I wasn't getting any signals or anything. It was just like crickets. And so I started reading a lot of literature about the afterlife. I started with the near-death experience and went on with that. And I tried to stay as close to scientific writings as I could, writings by medical doctors and PhD researchers. And so eventually after that, I got enough courage to call a medium to talk to my late husband. And I had heard about her in a seminar that was conducted by a woman who had written a book about this medium. Jana Anna is the medium's name. And the book was highly acclaimed. And I thought, well, if she's that well regarded, I can call her and maybe have some confidence in her. So a number of years ago, I called this medium and we had a very successful session with my late husband and eventually with other members of my family and friends. And eventually I got some of my buddies in on this because I didn't want to be the Lone Ranger in our group and the only kook. And so they had very successful readings with their departed loved ones. And we all agreed that there was some validity to what was going on. So my thought was, well, if I can connect with normal people, why not somebody famous? Why not Thomas Jefferson? Because I'd already written about him. And I wanted to know more about him and wanted to know what his thoughts were today about the country, the government that he helped create. So I asked Jana Anna, the medium, if she channeled historic figures. And she said yes. I gave her no clue ahead of time that I wanted to talk to Thomas Jefferson. And so we scheduled a session and I asked to speak with Jefferson and she brought him through for me.
Wow, that's really something. Well, what sort of process was it? Can you describe how that worked? I mean, how did it?
Yes. It was the same process that we used for my talks with my departed loved ones, except I used my laptop for this so that I could record what I was hearing more quickly. So I would arrange a week ahead of time with Jane of the hour that we were to talk. We were to talk a full hour. She called at that precise moment that we agreed on. I would put my phone on speaker, put it by my laptop, and then ask the questions and then type furiously away. She would record the sessions and then later on I would listen to them a number of times to make sure that I got everything right. And I couldn't type it all at the first go around. And so I've ended up with 8 recorded sessions, and I have these for people who were, say, for example, if a book reviewer doesn't believe that um, that I was, well, if a book review person can only believe that I wrote the book, this is proof that I was the scribe and not the writer. I
Mm.
have the proof in the recordings.
Well, what did he sound like? I mean, coming through a woman. I mean, was he speaking in 18th, early 19th century dialect or what?
No, that was very surprising. I somehow we think people are frozen in the time uh, in which they live, and in his case, at least, he's not. He spoke in modern terminology, and I had to explain that in the book, that he was using modern terms like ego, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And he also talked a lot about uh, women's disempowerment. And I'm sure during his day, he gave that very little thought,
Yeah.
but talked about women as well as people of color being disenfranchised. We had an unexpected visit from Sally Hemings.
Oh boy. For those who don't know, Sally Hemings, a lot of people think was Jefferson's mistress. She was a slave, only a quarter black, I think, but actually his wife's half sister or something, wasn't she?
That's correct.
So tell us about that.
Well, that was very strange. Um, so obviously, I had to have a chapter on slavery, and I went into all the reasons that he felt that he couldn't free his slaves, mostly all financial. And although his heart was in the right place, but he, unlike Washington, who was able to free his slaves after his wife died, Washington was a wealthy man. Jefferson was not a wealthy man, and it would have been very difficult for him to free his slaves. But be that as it may, there were a lot of reasons that he didn't, and he was always on the defensive about that because as a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Anyway, so we were talking about that. So I decided, I had to ask him about Sally Hemings, and he was cagey about that. He didn't really want to talk about that. And he said that he was really tired of running that scene in his head. He'd run it in his head so many times, but he sees her from in their spirit form, that they have a very high regard for each other. That even during his lifetime, he had a very high regard for her. So then the medium says, "Well, there's a female who's trying to come in, and would she be a slave woman?" And the medium didn't know about the Sally Hemings story. She didn't know much about Jefferson. And so I said, yes, possibly, because we're talking about her. And apparently there's some kind of green light if you're talking about a spirit. They know that somehow. So she intervened and said that, yes, they had had a good relationship in private, but that he would never acknowledge her publicly, and that she had great resentments about his two-faced way of being.
Interesting.
And but then she goes on to say that from her place in spirit now, she knows that she made a difference, and she has in the 21st century. She's a big deal up on Monticello right now. And they're telling her story and the story of her children and the story of the slaves. And she says she has no animosity now from her time in the flesh. And apparently they, you know, they get along very well and have respect for each other.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. Fascinating. Well, this has been just a most interesting conversation. Now, let's talk about where we can get the book. I know it's on Amazon, and I've told our listeners that I'll put a link down in the write up underneath this video on YouTube that they can click, and it'll go straight to that page. But you want to say anything more about that, or what plans you might have, or whatever?
Well, it is available on Amazon in paperback Kindle and now in hardback. And it is trending well. I am contacting everybody I know to let them know about the book, because it is important for a book to get noticed, to get out there for people to start buying it. It's not expensive. It's a short book. And so I hope some of your listeners will buy it and read it and share it with your friends and even send it to your congressperson.
Sounds like a wonderful idea. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And
Thank you, Steve.
good luck with the book.
Thank you. Thank you.